Please welcome David to the pulpit.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for having me back. I don't know what's wrong with y'all, but I wrote my remarks out to keep me in check, because if I don't, then I get wound up, and time goes by, somebody has to order pizza. Back in a former life, in my evangelical days, we used to ask the question, what does it mean when a preacher is preaching and he pauses to look at his watch? Absolutely nothing. So I wrote these out so you can all get to your meeting afterwards on time. So, Fragile Earth and the Poetics of Environmental Responsibility. Fancy title. We'll see what it means. We often speak of the vulnerability and fragility of the Earth, and rightly so. The planet and its ecosystems can be and have been gravely damaged. The United Nations Convention on Biodiversity estimates 15 to 200 species go extinct each day. Scientists are now watching with a close eye what is referred to as the sixth mass extinction. We are living in a time that has been dubbed the Anthropocene, a term defining the current geological age as one in which the current geologic changes and impact to the planet are driven overwhelmingly by human activity. Some have opted for the term capitalocene to indicate that the age is not merely the aggregate activity of all human beings, but is structurally related to the driving forces of global capitalism. Anthropogenic changes in the Earth's climate affect oceans and soil, altering regions of the Earth dramatically. The Earth, as an exploitable commodity, is an Earth that is perishable. Despite, however, the fact that the Earth is vulnerable to serious damage from human activity, it is far from irreparable. The joke, as it were, is on us. It turns out that the greater fragility, the greater vulnerability is human life. The danger to a fragile Earth presents an even graver danger to a more fragile humanity. We may burn the Earth, but in doing so consign ourselves to the flames. We will be gone, but the planet is a phoenix that will rise from its own ashes. The Earth has time, billions of years perhaps. Humanity does not have that kind of time. Let's be honest. When we talk about saving the environment, we are very much talking about saving ourselves and the future of human life on the planet. Don't misunderstand. This is not to say we are being egoistically self-centered, believing ourselves to be the only beings of value and importance. We can certainly and should look at rivers and trees, animals and such, and recognize that all aspects of what we call the environment are worth saving for their own sake. But as far as we know, our species is pretty much the sole species with these concerns and that raise these important questions. I mean, if you go into the ocean at the wrong time of day and you encounter a shark, it's not going to ask if you have intrinsic value. It's going to have you for dinner. And if we were not around to ask these questions, the planet would get along just fine without us. For many millennia, we humans have considered ourselves to be the pinnacle of creation. The reason for this idea is that we apparently are so rational. What I think we are masking with the focus on our rational capacities is how vulnerable we really are. Think about this for a moment. You're here right now, drawing breath, but you have absolutely no control over what makes that happen. Your heart is beating and other important systems of your body are doing their jobs, and it is all happening just because it does. Of course, we can conduct ourselves in ways that are symbiotic with our bodies and its systems, but you didn't start yourself up. And the best you can do is cooperate with your body to keep it running as well and as long as possible. And from some of the birthday announcements, it sounds like you're doing a great job. You and I are fragile and vulnerable. We are absolutely and utterly dependent on a world for our existence that does not share that dependence on us. Breathable air, drinkable water, edible plants, a livable climate, and so forth are all things our environment produces for our survival, and the moment it ceases to do so, well, we're done for. Yet, there is nothing that the planet needs for its existence that we provide it. If the planet perishes, we perish. But the converse is not true. If we perish, the planet does not. So, why am I going on and on with all this cheery talk about how we're all going to die? Besides the fact that we need to recognize our dependence on the environment, and that it is in our own legitimate interest to do no harm, I do want to highlight something that we do share, that I think is the heart of what I'm calling a poetics of environmental responsibility. Every single living thing, human and other than human, shares a will to survive. We have this powerful instinctual drive to live and not die. All living things, got to read my own notes here. Every deepest instinct that we have and that all living things share want nothing more than to persist. But here again, we humans are distinct. How? Well, out of all living things that want to survive, we are distinguished by being the very least equipped of all of them to actually succeed. It is not that we cannot survive in the wild. It is just that our ability to do so is by far the least of all living things. That's why we build dwellings, have heating and air conditioning, and all sorts of tools and technologies to help us get along in the world. In our domesticated neighborhoods, we are not typically exposed to natural predators. We have protection from the elements of changing seasons. If we didn't, there would be a pretty good chance that far fewer of us would still be around. Here's the catch, though. All of our activity to master other than human nature in order to survive has escalated to the point that will be the very thing that kills us. Human presence has always altered nature. From hunting and gathering to irrigation and agriculture to building great structures, we have always altered our immediate environment. Beavers do the same thing, incidentally, when they build a dam. But what is different now? The way in which we alter our environment is on a global and even atmospheric scale, with damages that we can't simply turn back the clock on, and they will not resolve themselves. Hence, our will to survive must turn from mastering nature to what some thinkers refer to as an ethics of responsibility. If we are to survive, we have to take responsibility for the long-range effects of our current social order. This is what I mean by a poetics of environmental responsibility. Why a poetics? Well, going back all the way at least to our buddy Aristotle, we learned that the idea of poetry, the Greek word is poiesis, that's about, I think, one of two Greek words I actually know. I don't know Greek, but I know that word. The word means to create, to make, to create new worlds. It is to unfold a new future out of the present. The questions we must ask ourselves are these. What kind of world is it in which we wish to dwell? And what kind of people do we wish to be? Another thing that is distinct about human being is that in addition to merely wishing to survive, we have a concern for our own being. Not just that we are, but how we are to be. The future will become present, that is for certain. But what it will look like will have been imagined beforehand. This is why we must ask ourselves these questions. Without thinking about what kind of world we want, without the power of imagination, we can't begin to work for it. There are two things that imagination can do. First, imagination is a critique of the real. When we think forward to the world we desire, we can evaluate the present world in terms of our desire and discern what we are doing now that works against it. Secondly, imagination gives us the power to redescribe reality. Imagination is the ground of action. The greatest challenge we face is this. Just as the crisis is systemic and structural, not merely the aggregate effect of individual behaviors, so the solution can only be systemic and structural as well. The modern world has a way of co-opting everything for profit. Consume less, said no product advertisement ever. When the environmental movement gained enough traction, to influence behavior and our choices, companies all of a sudden became environmentally conscious and said, consume more of this green product. Social theorist Mark Fisher put it this way: the fantasy being that Western consumerism, far from being intrinsically implicated in systemic global inequalities, could itself solve them. All we have to do is buy the right products. How do we help the poor? Give to good causes. And we should. How do we solve the environmental crisis? Recycle and buy environmentally friendly stuff. And, don't use plastic straws and things like that. It's all your fault. But change the social, political, and economic structures that cause the problem? Nah. Well, each of us must, as individuals, must take responsibility for our own lives and concern for our own being, living our lives in a way that is equal to our values. The fact is, to mitigate climate change, for example, we need system change. We will need global cooperation and cooperative global institutions to make a difference and to ensure a world habitable for future generations. I suppose we're not going to leave here today and just go make that happen. It's a vast and daunting task with a lot of moving parts. A lot of hope, though. I think of like Greta Thunberg and others. Individuals can make that difference. Was it Margaret Mead that was quoted here today? That was marvelous.
Yes.
Yeah. It is a vast and daunting task with a lot of moving parts, but if you take away anything this morning, it's not to buy into the lie that it's all up to you as individuals, whatever our part may be. I want to conclude with a final consideration. What I've been talking about so far is the global effect of the ecological crisis, but we must not forget two additional things. The deleterious effects on the planet come, by and large, from the global north, but it is the global south that bears the greatest burden. In terms of what they call distributive justice, there is an unequal distribution between benefits and burdens. The second thing is that not all environmental problems are global, and we must not diminish the importance of regional environmental damage in the communities that are affected. From Love Canal in the late 1970s, if you're familiar with that story, that sort of launched the environmental justice movement, until now, the cases where innocent people suffer from environmental harms caused by others are too numerous to name. Students at the University of Michigan have compiled a partial list of current environmental justice cases, both national and international, and what they've done alone is staggering. What is more, overwhelmingly people of color and indigenous peoples suffer the most. The recognition of these realities and the recognition of the rights of all to live in a healthy and safe environment is necessary to make the change that is needed. So dare we hope? Well, there's nothing else to do, so we might as well hope, right? As long as we're here, let's continue to hope, and to the extent that we can, to act. And perhaps while we hope and act, we can be a little poetic about it too. Thank you.